Welcome to another Liquid Bullet Productionz. With us back again is Mr. Albert Patrick. Albert, thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
So today we're going to go into the talking about the serial killer Colin Ireland. But before we get into that, can we just go right back and get a little bit more about your history and your upbringing and stuff?
Certainly. 72 years ago, last month, I was born in Scotland in St Andrews on the 14th of October 49. I was the eldest child of 5 children. My dad was a farm labourer. My mum worked in the local school as a cleaner. And being the eldest with obviously other kids come along, there was no room for me. So I
pushed to one side.
I had to decide what I was doing as a young man, obviously. So 16 years of age, I applied and joined the Metropolitan Police as a young cadet.
Right.
And I've been in London since 1966.
Can I just ask you, what made you go sort of be interested in the police? Something inspired you, or?
We had family friends who were cops up home, and a colleague who was in the same class as me, Bill Bold, he was slightly older. He applied and he was down in London for about 6 months before I joined, and he said he was having a great time and I should give it a go, and that's exactly what I did.
Can I just ask you a little bit of sort of when you first joined, like sort of, do you have to go through a training regime and stuff?
Yes, I, as a kid at school, I was reasonably good at sport. I wasn't brilliant. I enjoyed sports day, and believe it or not, I didn't play rugby, played football, reasonably good right back, did athletics, and I wasn't a very good swimmer, so didn't do much of that. So at school, I enjoyed the sport activity. When I got into the cadet corps, it was just a different world, you know. I was competing even as a youngster against others, boxing, judo, wrestling, tug of war, basketball, all the sort of sports.
So was that connected with actual being in the police force?
Yes, that was part of
not
it.
Outside of sport, so.
No, I joined as I developed as a wrestler. I joined other clubs to gain better experience, because obviously not all the experience is going to be within the Metropolitan Police.
Can I just ask you a little bit? Obviously, you've done quite well in your rugby and your wrestling.
I've been to 3 Commonwealth Games. I've got 2 silvers and a bronze. I was a team captain in Edinburgh '86. European Police Champion over 10 years. Met Police Champion, British Police Champion in wrestling. And I've played rugby all over the world for Kent, Blackheath, Met Police, and who else did I play for? I had a little spell with Ask Games and I fell out with a coach. So that's where I've been in the rugby field. Tug of war, I was in the national tug of war team for the Met, who did very well over a 4 or 5 year period. So I've achieved quite a bit in the sport.
Probably more than most people do in their lifetime, just in that area alone.
Yeah, well, I forgot to mention I am married. I'm still married. I got 2 lovely girls and 3 grandchildren, and I stopped my wife driving this flash car in East End of London way back in the 70s, and she's kept me on the straight and narrow since. Yeah. So we're still together, we're still ticking, and we're still surviving.
Did you charge it out, Albert?
I charged it, yeah. Yeah, I did. Anyway, here we are, it's 2021, nearly finished. We've all got over COVID, thank God, and it's been a terrible year, really. Yeah. But life goes on.
Yeah, that's right. So where's your police career sort of taken you?
Joined, as I said, the cadet corps, and I was stationed in South London at, forget the name of the station, good God, I'll remember in a second, on L Division, just south of Brixton. I was there for a couple of months, then I went to Ashford to be part of phase 2 training, then came back to London and joined the job proper. I was a PC at Bethnal Green, then a young detective at Chelsea, passed the exam, came back to Bethnal Green to await the time to be promoted, off to Carter Street as a young sergeant. I had 8-9 years at Carter Street as a uniform sergeant, detective sergeant, and then I got promoted. No, I didn't. I went off to the flying squad as a DS in the flying squad, and from there I came back as a DI at Brixton. I arrived the day of the first riot and I left the day of the second ride. But Brixton was an amazing place. It was, you had to do today what had to be done, because tomorrow there'll be another load of crimes in your in trade that you had to get on and deal with. And I dealt with murders, robbery. I remember being chased by about 200 black people down the open road because we turned over the club and didn't like it. Wow. But anyway, that's part of the challenge of policing, which I actually
Can I just ask you a little bit about, obviously, the different sort of areas of police force you're going, and what sort of training has to go into them sort of parts?
Well, as a detective, you've got to go off to detective training school. Yeah. I've done public order.
How long does that last?
It's a 9-week course. Well, the initial training is, I think it was 6 or 7 week course as a young PC to learn as best you can the law. Then detective training school, which are 6-7 weeks, and then when it came to public order, I was promoted to chief inspector by then, and I worked on the News International disturbances and Notting Hill and a few other areas of policing. So I was trained on how to be trained in to fight the flying petrol bomb.
Is there a certain sort of time scale from like doing your one training before you can go up into the next?
Well, you've got to apply to move on. If you want to be a detective, you've got to apply and pass the exam. You don't automatically become a detective, you've got to apply. And obviously you've got to pass promotion exams. So they go hand in hand in relation to how you advance in the job. And I wasn't particularly that keen on promotion. My promotion took quite a long time. Yeah. So I enjoyed learning over a much longer period of time in that rank doing that job rather than quickly rushing through getting promoted and not being that good at policing.
So when you was in the police, was there sort of a goal you wanted to go down? Because obviously there's different areas of policing, isn't there?
Yeah, I've always had
murder, etc.
Yeah, I've always had crime as a.
So that
my best two would be murder and armed robbery. Yeah. They seem to go hand in glove, and I've got some of the best experiences dealing with armed robbers in the East End. We were getting ripped apart in the 90s, and murders. They go like that in London. So when I was head of CID in South East London, we had 100% clear-up rate in 1990. Is that luck, or is that just the fact that you're getting on and dealing with the job properly?
Can I just ask you a little bit about the murder side? So how do you how did your first sort of deal with that, or experience seeing a dead person and stuff?
My very first murder was as a TDC at Chelsea, and I didn't particularly like it. I came in the morning, I got paired up with a DC, we got 3 actions, off you went, and sometimes the actions could have taken an hour, sometimes it could have taken a day. You came back at 6 o'clock at night and reported in. You never saw the governor, you never got told what was happening, you were kept in the dark.
So you didn't really know till you got
and that was it. You couldn't knock on the governor's door and say, Governor, this is what I think. You weren't part, I'm putting a bit harsh, but that's how I remember it. And then my next murder was at Brixton's, a DI, Leila Cortez. She had moved into a flat and she had been mad and she was murdered. Necrophilia, if you know what that is. She was sexually attacked after death. And believe it or not, the neighbours solved it. They gave me an artist's impression. The artist's impression was good for a local burglar. Identified the burglar, gave him 20 pieces of paper and he wrote his own confession. And how do we know he'd done it? Because he'd left a screwdriver in the back of the body and only the killer knew that. Oh. And he pled guilty, well he pled not guilty to murder, guilty to manslaughter and was convicted. And that was my second experience of murder. And then to be the SIO, the Senior Investigating Officer, for probably 20 or 30 murders in the East End of London in the time I was there, and then to be head of the CID dealing with murders in South East London, I gained a lot of experience. And I was the 4th SIO of the Stephen Lawrence case, which wasn't a good news story. Perhaps when we finish hearing about the Colin Ireland case, we'll say it was a good news story.
Can I just ask you a little bit about sort of your mindset when you sort of had to deal with these situations? Does that sort of, can you leave that and come home and do your normal stuff, or does that still play in your mind and picture things? And
particularly in the Colin Ireland case, I I was coming home, I was shattered, I went to bed, never slept. I think she quite enjoyed it because she was just sort of encouraging me to keep going because it was a pressure time. So I packed a bag and I lived in the section house up in Chelsea, just to save me 2 hours travelling a day, or 2.5 hours travelling a day. So that was something I learned from it, and the right thing to have done. But as far as I've missed my thread there a second, so we have to fight again. Sorry. So that is murder investigation.
Yeah. So we just went into your mindset.
The mindset. Sorry.
So how you sort of deal with it, or
there is it's who, where, when, why, and how. So if you look at that, you've got to try and establish that. You've got to do a decent job with your crime scene, because that's your starter for 10. That's where the murder took place. Yeah, and then it's a case of systematically going through a process of messages, action, documents, exhibit statements, and putting a case together. Now, if somebody rings up and says, I did it, then probably relatively easy, or if it's a domestic, where the evidence is there before he even comes into the charge room.
Yeah.
So, but it's that detective ability to go down the right path to establish the truth of what happened at that crime scene.
Yeah.
That is the skill, and that is, you learn that from having made mistakes over the years at whatever part of the precinct you were doing.
Do you have to sort of hold back your sort of own feelings and process? Because obviously if you're going into a murder and it's maybe something like children, obviously for me that would be quite upsetting to see. But on a professional level, surely you've got sort of, I don't know how you deal with that. Is that?
We've got a lot of criticism around how we dealt with the families in relation to the aftermath of a murder. And my view was, even as a young SIO, I would sit down with the family as the head of that inquiry and say, this is where I am. I wouldn't give them any bullshit, I wouldn't tell them any lies. I would just say, I will do my damnedest to identify, arrest, charge and convict the person or people responsible for your kid's murder or your wife's murder, whatever the situation is. Tell them face to face and honestly. You won't be able to go there and every day, and now we've got qualified, experienced family liaison officers who are very good at doing a great job.
It must be quite a hard job to actually tell someone that.
Yes, it's terrible. Some they're not easy. It's a really tough challenge.
When people look at policemen and stuff, they sort of forget about all them hard parts of the job.
And we've all got kids, haven't we?
That's right. Yeah. Right then, should we go into the Colin Ireland case?
While we're here.
So, can you talk us a little bit how you got involved in the Colin Ireland serial killer?
Certainly. I was the senior investigating officer on call. That was the next one to take a job if a murder happened. It was Wednesday good God, let's just have a quick look. It was Wednesday the 9th of June 1993. 11 a.m. when I got a call to say there's been a murder in Dalston. So in the car and off I go. I had a fly-on-the-wall television camera crew running with me at the time from Crime Monthly.
Oh, so they're actually running with you?
They were running with me.
Day one, investigating
from day one. And I arrived at the crime scene. I tend not to put my great big size 12 feet inside the crime scene. I asked to look at the Polaroids, see video if they've got a video, and take the advice of the forensic examiners who are on scene doing the job. But this was a bizarre scene. I'm probably the only SIO in the whole world who's ever had a cat killed and draped across the naked body of Andrew Coleherne.
A cat?
A cat, his own cat, with a condom on the tail, in the mouth of Andrew Coleherne, and in the mouth of the cat was a condom on Andrew's penis in the cat's mouth. Unbelievable. I don't think I'll never forget it. I remember it today, 27 years ago, as if it was yesterday. it really was a
quite
bizarre,
a disturbing image to see,
terrible,
isn't it?
unbelievably terrible.
So Andrew Collier was the first man who was killed?
He was, no, Andrew Collier was the first one I got appointed to deal with. So I set up an incident room as you would and got on with investigating it. And I'll explain in more detail later as to exactly what I did. So Andrew Collier was the first case I dealt with, and I had an incident room at Harbour Square, and we got on with the investigation, house to house inquiries, and gathering witnesses to give us some idea what happened. So that was the start of a 10 on that one. I made inquiries in relation to another murder that had taken place earlier in the year, Peter Walker, a row Henning I knew very well from Brixton. He was SI and he was just about to close his incident room down because he hadn't got any other lines of inquiry. He'd done everything he could in relation to the Peter Walker case. He was a gay man. He had been to the Coleherne public house, the same as Andrew Collier, and he was found naked on his bed, on his back, with a teddy bear in the 6 and 9 position, draped across the body. Not as bizarre as Andrew Collier, but still it's a signature.
So did that make you think that they could be linked?
Well, that's exactly what my thinking was. I went to my bosses and said, I think we've got a problem here. There's a guy bringing up as well saying that he had killed Walker. Why hadn't we made the links with Dunn? Why hadn't we made the links with Bradley? And I've killed Collier. So there was a concern there, and within a couple of days, an officer in overall command, Detective Chief Lieutenant Ken John, was appointed to head up the investigation.
So who was the second man that was actually found killed?
As I said, Andrew Collier was my first.
Yeah.
Talked to Peter Walker. I made further inquiries and established that a man called Christopher Dunn had been killed, but it wasn't accepted as a murder because the pathologist said it was sex gone wrong.
Right.
And it was at that stage no evidence to say that it was a murder, but his money had been stolen from his account, and other inquiries were quickly made to get on and deal with it as a murder. And then the next one in the series was number 3, which was Perry Bradley. He was a congressman's son. He wasn't known as a gay man. His family didn't know. Brian Edwards, the SIO, was keen not to jump to the wrong conclusions, so it wasn't connected and linked at that early stage.
So when was his murder reported? That was...
Yes, that was, excuse me just one second, Perry Bradley, Monday the 7th of June.
So that would have been before Andrew Collier?
Correct, 2 days before.
Yeah, but obviously at this point there was no link between them as yet.
No.
And then the next body was Chris Dunn?
In the order of it was Walker, Dunn, Bradley, Collier, and then the last one, which I'll come to now, Emmanuel Spiteri. We had a man ring up saying that why haven't you made the links again? I'm responsible for killing all those people, and by the way, I've killed somebody else. He killed a man called Emmanuel Spiteri, checked all the incident rooms in London, no one by that name had been found, so it was a case of basically sitting and waiting until the body had been found, because we had no idea where.
So the
we
court
knew it was in South London.
It didn't give you a clue
Didn't
where
give
it
me an
was.
address. Didn't give me an address. He just said his name. Obviously, we were making inquiries, but within 2 hours, I got a phone call from Ian Crampton in South London to say that a body had been found murdered in a flat in Hither Green. So off I went in the car, and this was again a gay man naked with a harness on, lying flat on his back, all strangled apart from Peter Walker with a noose or a rope, and furniture had been piled up round the bed, and they tried to set fire to it, but the windows were closed and it not enough oxygen there to set fire. So
can I just ask you, so all these different murders, Was different police officers going to their
Yes,
murders, yeah?
absolutely. That's how it was until it's linked. So
Until you realised there was something linked.
absolutely. What happened, it was obvious to all of us, I think, that you can't have 5 senior detectives trying to solve the killing of 5 men when the guy's ringing up saying he's done it and there's probably just one killer. So Ken John made the decision to split London in half, east and west. I took the east end of London and dealt with the murders that were relevant to the east end, and Ken and Brian Edwards did the others, and Walker's who what didn't lay on file, but it was there to look at if we needed to, because there was nothing else immediately that required doing. So we had 2 SIOs, unfortunately 2 incident rooms. That made life difficult for me getting all the way to West London. So yes, two SIOs, and we got on with that. Holmes linked it, which is a Home Office large major inquiry system. So we were talking to each other on the Holmes link, and the same procedure taking place at each incident.
Can I just ask you, obviously, that's, from what I'm hearing, that's quite a shocking sort of find, isn't it, them sort of murder cases. What was your sort of feeling on this case at that point? What did you really obviously think it was a serial killer? And
if you've got somebody ringing up saying, I've killed all of those people and names them, he's either telling a pack of lies and he's just doing it to annoy the police as false information. But so you've got to take notice. But you just don't link because somebody says, I've killed all 5, or all 4, or all 3. You've got to look at the systems that are there to tell you that there is linking features. And a similar fact evidence chart that I've got here will just highlight all the various issues and headings for that. Basically, where had they been with a stranger pickup, were they found in a bed, how were they murdered, was money taken, the marks on the body, all those points that Peter West, who was the pathologist, was comfortable by saying that there was a definite link between the Walker case, the first murder, and my case, the Coleherne murder. So from an early day, they were linked, and within a week or so, the others were linked as well.
Can I just ask, so where would you start with a case like this? Where do you start to look for clues and stuff, or how does it all begin?
Well, you start at the beginning, which is the crime scene where the body was found, and you've got to get your best evidence from that crime scene, and just a simple one is body temperature. Take the bloody body temperature so you can give some idea as to when they were killed, because if somebody's saying that no, I wasn't with them on Saturday because I was halfway up the M1 and I couldn't have killed them, but if the pathologist can say, oh yes, he was killed at such and such a time, as close as, then that helps in building.
Just asking a little bit about that body temperature. So, is there a sort of certain temperature it drops or goes up between?
It affects the status of the body, and the body changes colour and changes hypostatus in relation to how long the blood has been lying.
So you could sort of, we're not talking hours, you're talking...
I'm refresh my memory on it because I haven't been dealing with murders for a while.
So you're not looking for like a temperature in the body, you're looking at sort of...
Yeah, and in the room as well where it happened.
Right.
Yeah, so that does help. It's not conclusive sometimes, but a pathologist would normally, should, and rightfully so, take the body temperature of any murder victim.
Can I just ask you then, so would you just take fingerprints around the scene and stuff like that? Or?
This case was solved by brilliant fingerprint detective work, and we'll do that in part 2.
Okay.
but yes, fingerprints, DNA, CCTV, house-to-house inquiries. Lovely lady, Faye Vernon. Remember her like it was yesterday. She lived above Andrew Coleherne. She was looking out her window at midnight when she heard a disturbance in the street. There had been a fight, police were there, all the blue lights, all the usual stuff. So she pokes her head out the window and she sees Andrew Coleherne coming home with his tall white man. She gave us a clue. We were looking for a tall white man. So that's just that simple part in relation to achieving good house to house. She went on a video identification parade. Did she pick her out? Did she pick him out or not? Come on.
I'm guessing probably not. If it's night time and
Come on,
she's
so
up
she
behind-
didn't let me down.
Oh, she did. She actually picked him out.
Yeah.
'Cause
So-
I remember once we'd done I was years ago when I was at school, but the police came in and there's a picture up of someone on the screen, and sort of you were talking, waiting for the class to start. You've looked at the picture, and then when the class starts, she's turned it off and says, right, describe that guy.
Describe that man. Exactly.
And it's totally different because
Yeah.
you're not paying attention, physically concentrating on it. It's totally different to what you believe it was.
True.
So it does sort of just shows you it's not always correct.
That's true. Others didn't pick him out, by the way, because there was quite a few sort of witnesses around the Coleherne that saw the various victims with, in the end, was Colin Ireland.
So just up to that point, so he'd actually phoned up and said...
Yeah, he'd rung the son, and this is quite interesting. On the Walker case, he rung the son to say, had the bodies been found, because Peter Walker had dogs, I think 2 dogs, in his house, and he wanted to make sure that they had been found, and I'll explain that in a second. So he rung about the dogs to say if they'd been found, and he also rung the police the next day saying, why haven't you made the links? I'm told you I've killed Peter Walker, what about done? That's wrong, mate. I'll start again. Not on that one, because even that was the first one. So many of them, forgive me. Peter Walker, he rung to say had they found the dogs. And the reason for that is there was a missing person murder where the victim 2 months before had been at the Coleherne and his dogs had eaten every part of the skin. Terrible. So it was only the bones, and this was in Southend, only the bones were found. We interviewed Ireland about it, he denied it, but when you think about it, why are you ringing up asking about have the dogs been found if it's not concerning you? And I believe that Colin Ireland killed the man in Southend where all the skin and body tissues were eaten by the dog.
What do you think the idea of him phoning up was? What was his initial...
He read, when we interview him under caution, and he's interviewed on, he made his admissions after not opening his mouth for 2 weeks. He wanted to be a serial killer. He had read the FBI manuals. He just wanted notoriety. He wanted to be, I am the... and I think he had a dislike to gay men as well, albeit he said he was bisexual.
So do you think to him it's like a game, he's trying to give you a little clue, but
Yeah,
he's not
absolutely.
going to tell you before, he just wants you to play a game with you.
Exactly. When we talked about the cat, I asked him, Jim, my DC asked me a question about the cat. Why did you kill the cat? Why did you do that? It was for 2 reasons. He never told me that it was HIV, and he did it so that when Mr. Sergeant, the PC Sergeant, whatever it is, came in, go and tell the rest of the staff what you found at this scene.
Yeah.
So he was using it. He was being Colin Ireland, and he was using it as part of his game, I think.
Can I just ask you a little bit of background on Colin Ireland? Do you know much about
Yeah, he got previous convictions. He was no fixer. Well, he says he's no fixer, but he was living with friends in Southend. He grew up in Dartford in Kent. He had worked, he says, in the Foreign Legion, but not quite sure about that. I think he had a trip to France and came home probably the next day. But never came to light for assault or for anything that would trouble you. He was known to 2 special constable officers in Southend, so they got on very well with him. So he didn't stick out as a gay man particularly well from what I remember of him. He was married and divorced. He ran a pub. His wife ran a pub, and I think he had children. I wouldn't be 100% sure of that. So he was married, and at the time he was working in a hostel and earning a bit of money to keep himself going. Just almost Londoner.
So did he have it like some sort of serial killers have got like mental health issues, haven't they? Like,
well, no, he was examined and there was nothing brought up at trial.
So
no,
it wasn't mentally disturbed.
It wasn't mentally disturbed in any way, shape or form. Yeah, not at all. In fact, his affidavit when he was arrested, because we'll talk about that later, he went into a solicitor in Southend and said, you know, I'm the man you've captured me on the CCTV, and he gave an explanation as to why he was caught on camera. So he wasn't daft. Listen, he never left anything at the crime scene. He took everything away. He was forensically aware. He made two mistakes: being caught on a camera and leaving that finger mark at my crime scene, found by a brilliant detective. Not me.
It doesn't make sense to me that he's like giving you clues, but then
playing a game.
It's like he doesn't want to be caught, does he? So
well, yeah, that's a good question. If you don't want to be caught, you ain't going to be ringing up.
Yeah, that's the bit. Is sort of like
and bragging why haven't you made the links?
Yeah. And at first, when you told me about you found out about the dogs, like he's already killed a cat and the man. So is he really going to care about the dog? It's not like he's worried about.
Well, he didn't want the body to be found with just the bones. I think he had a bit of humanity.
So he wanted you to see where he
make sure that the body was found, so that the dogs weren't eaten. I know, bizarre.
It makes you wonder what goes, how these people's minds actually work. It's quite disturbing, really, isn't it? Can I just ask you about this sort of the media interest in this case?
Yeah, certainly. As you know, I had a fly-in-the-wall camera crew running with me from Crime Monthly, and they did a brilliant appeal for us a few days after the link was made. So that was helpful in relation to first-hand knowledge. Initially, we were criticised by not informing the gay community that there was a person who was attacking them or picking them up from the Coleherne, ended up taking them back to the house and strangling them and leaving them dead, obviously at the crime scene. On Peter Walker, he suffocated with a bag. The others, he would tie a noose around his throat, keep him handcuffed on the bed, and he would turn the noose on and turn the noose off, just to watch the blood changing in the face.
Torture and pain.
And he would always wait till the last thing, first thing in the morning rather, to make his way through the rush hour traffic, taking everything that he had touched or leaving no clues behind. So that was at the crime scene there. In relation to the media, as soon as we found the Manuel Spiteri body in Heather Green, South London, we decided to call an immediate press conference. So we had an urgent press conference at 10 o'clock in the evening at Scotland Yard, just to warn the community, the gay community, that he'd struck again and he'd killed 3 in a week. And Ken John was brilliant. He said, enough's enough pain, enough anguish, give yourself up, please, because we don't want a 6 murder in London. So he was excellent, and I think that probably actually worked, because we know a few weeks later that's exactly what he did do. So lots of I got asked the question because I was doing an interview, a brief in the media for the gay community after they weren't present because no one knew the contact numbers at 10 o'clock at night. So we briefed them the next day and they said, how many gay officers have you got in the inquiry? And I said, is that really important to you? I said, how do you know I'm not gay? I said, how do you know I'm not gay? Yeah, I'm still going to do the best I can to solve this case. And by the way, I do have. There's 2 of them, but you're not going to know who they are. So that shut it down straight away. And the police weren't getting on very well with the liaison and the difficulties, because sadomasochistic sex, we were charging people with assaulting the partner because it was over-the-top injuries, and that didn't go down particularly well. And there was a guy called Jeremy from Gallup, the liaison group. He was excellent. He convinced a member of the gay community to talk to me, and he gave a brilliant description of seeing this man with Emmanuel Spiteri on the train down to Hither Green. So that all helped, and that made a huge difference.
Can I just ask about sort of where was he actually finding these guys?
All from the Coleherne, believe it or not. The Coleherne Public House is a gay pub in Kensington, just near Chelsea Football Stadium. And when I was a young TDC there, it was well known as a gay pub back in the 70s. So he would pick up his partner for the night from the Coleherne.
And they all came from that
all
same
came
place?
From there, yeah. But look where we found them. Found one in Kensington, we found one in Chelsea, we found one
quite local to that.
Yeah, and also further afield, up into Dalston, down in the Hither Green, and up into northwest London. So it depends where they lived as to where they would end up.
Can I just ask you a little bit more about the, you're obviously doing a fly on the wall documentary then. So what was actually filming you for initially, before this stumbled onto the...
Yeah, it was following an SIO, a senior investigating officer, in what he would do in a murder investigation. So it was
just happened
I was told to get on with it and I did it. So as simple as that. So there was nothing particularly. It was me. I was the one called SIO. The next week they would run with the next SIO. Yeah. So I think it was just to show the public of London that this is what it takes to investigate a murder. Yeah. And they would film.
Must have got more than they bargained for with that.
Oh, I think they were very, very pleased with the outcome of that particular programme. I'm sure it.
Is that anywhere to be seen online or on YouTube or anything?
It was out, Crime Monthly, and I've done 3 or 4 interviews that have been out produced by, I think, wasn't Sky but somebody else. So there's about 3 or 4 out there from.
Can't find them somewhere.
Historically, it's now, I think, past the interest time, because we're talking about 26, 27.
Can I just ask one more question about Colin Ireland? I'm not 100% sure if it's his case. I've read a few different murders and I'm getting confused. Was he abused as a child or something?
Yes.
He was?
Yes.
Can I ask you a little bit about that?
If you'd asked me that question before, I could have done some research on it. But yes, he was abused as a child. And his file, I've got some of the detail because I used this folder to lecture other detectives in the UK to learn from what I learned, to make sure they didn't do the same mistakes or they could deal with the issues that would arrive. But yes, he had been abused as a kid. But he was a big man, I think, was he a bully? Was he weird? Was he dangerous? Was he evil? I think he was all those.
Yeah. I think he must be to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, just like I say, when I was sort of watching some videos about some stuff, it seems to be a pattern that sometimes if they were abused as a child...
Yeah, not abused within the family. I don't think it was abused within the family. It was abused through his upbringing in his school and that way. Because I think, if I remember rightly, Mum and Dad were good as gold and disappointed that it happened to their son.
It seems strange to me though, like if you're abused as a child, you wouldn't want anyone else to be treated like you would,
right? To
make you the opposite. But then they sort of form that pattern, don't they? Some of them. That's
true. Well, let me just finish off here by saying, excuse me. This is the notes made by DC Gillen when he rung up telling us about the Emmanuel Spiteri case. I said, "This is Jim. This is DC Gillen. Why are there only 2 murders linked?" So my apologies. This is Ireland talking to DC Gillen. Yep. "Why are there only 2 murders linked? I'm the chap who did it. I did your one and Peter Walker one. A chap called Bradley in Kensington Chris done in Willesden. Another one from the weekend, which you may not have found yet, a Maltese guy called Emmanuel. I set fire to the room afterwards, killed them all with a noose in Hither Green, Lewisham. Surname began with K. Take any cash and bank cards. I set fire to the balls to get the PIN number. I killed Emmanuel by stuffing a gag in his mouth and then strangling with a noose. It's a different noose, all of them. I don't use the same one. I've read a lot of books on serial killers, and I think it's 4 that the FBI classify as a serial, so I may stop now. I've done fine. I just wanted to see if it could be done. I pick on homosexuals because they are the kind of closed community and it's easy. I'll probably stop now and never offend again. I'm going to go now. I may ring back to give you a few pointers and see how we're getting on. Bye.
That's strange, isn't it?
And that is Jim's note. In the middle here, I've got the exact words he used, because brilliant detective work got that and camp on tape, and I'll talk about that part 2. Or so you want to talk about it now? I'll talk about it now. D.S. Webster, my right hand, my back carrier, he ran upstairs because we knew that he was ringing up and bragging and teasing the police, so the phones externally were all hooked up to tape recorders. He had run the local switching centre who put him through on the police line, and it wasn't recorded. So thank God, Terry West from my DS, he rung to his office, grabbed a portable, stuck it on the phone, and we got his voice, and we got him admitting. That's a summary of what he admitted, and in the middle there, when we may read it later, but much the same. Unbelievable.
Can I just pick up a little bit? Did you say set fire to his balls?
Yes.
So actually,
To get the PIN number.
while they were alive,
Yeah.
Oh, I mean,
I've tried to be as careful as I
without
can,
going into too much gruesome detail, but
without any group, to try and keep it not.
What surprised me there as well was the way he said, "I might not kill again now." So like he was just going to do them and disappear back into the background and just live a normal life again.
And he might have done that if we hadn't
Hadn't have caught him.
had a bit of luck. And we'll talk about luck.
Yeah,
In
and I'll just
part
ask
two.
you a little bit of what part 2 is going to.
Yes, it's part 2 is for me is how we gathered the evidence against Colin Ireland, what we did to achieve that, and if he had pleaded not guilty, would the extra evidence that the public haven't heard about, because he pleaded guilty, there was no need to tell them about it. So the things that I wish to highlight would be the voice ID parade that we'd organised, the video ID parade for the witnesses who'd seen him, how we got the CCTV, how we got the fingerprint, and what else? I think that was it. And also his background. A lot of work was done into his background to show the type of person he was, and people did come forward and say that he was watching the television when Ken John was on there, and obviously I asked some questions about it. So lots of background information. We made mistakes. We listened to, and I found a profiler who gave wrong advice. And I'll explain that as we go to the interview. His interview was amazing. He just sat there, matter of fact, and just spluttered it out as if it was yesterday. Just everything he said, it was just an amazing interview. Amazing. So, as I said, was he an evil man? I think he was. And is he in the right place? Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Albert, thank you ever so much.